All right, you seem to have quite the taste for the dramatic. You sent us something, a literary massacre thriller straight out of good old Germany,
Yeah.
Berlin, a dimly lit conference room, Friedrich Merz. Sounds, well, let's just say interesting. You've really unearthed something special, haven't you?
Interesting is definitely one way to put it, but forget the blood and guts. We're not talking about literal violence here, more like a razor-sharp satirical dissection of German politics in the year 2025. And the kicker is, after this brutal takedown, the author whips out an unconventional set of instructions for literary self-defense. The key word here is poetry slam.
Huh.
Pretty unexpected, right?
Totally. First, we get a verbal beatdown of the political landscape, and then bam! Poetry slams as a savior. So our mission today is to dissect this cynical view of politics and then see what's behind this idea that a little bit of truth in rhyme can save the world, or at least shake things up a bit.
Precisely. And be warned. The author doesn't mince words. There's no sugarcoating here. It's direct, sometimes brutally honest, seasoned with a healthy dose of dark humor. But that's what makes it so, well, fascinating.
Okay, then let's dive in. Friedrich Merz, in this conference room, staring into his coffee, stirring and stirring as if he's reliving the end of the Grand Coalition. And then there's this steel mask. What do you think the author is trying to throw in our face? Is it just about Merz, or is there something more to it?
Well, I think the steel mask is less a character study of Mr. Merce and more a symbol of the theatricality of modern politics in general. It's about the facade that many politicians wear, a certain aloofness, maybe even an emotional coldness. And that stirring of coffee, that almost meditative slowness, could be interpreted as an expression of a certain helplessness or even that aforementioned alienation from the problems of the people. It's showtime, but without a real script.
True. Then there's the peek into the Bundestag anno 2025. The CDU under Merz with the charisma of a broken calculator after burnout and a smile like a mortician who just got his Christmas bonus. I mean, talk about laughter from the grave. What does this broadside tell us about the author's expectations, or rather lack thereof, for the CDU?
Well, the choice of words is deliberately drastic, of course. But the core message is a critique of a perceived lack of innovation and a certain, well, let's call it joylessness. The broken calculator suggests that there are no groundbreaking ideas to be expected anymore, just the management of the status quo. And the mortician's smile with the Christmas bonus, that could be interpreted as a sign of a certain cynicism or at least a detachment from the truly relevant issues, like, we've got our piece of the pie.
And then the AfD as a Nazi in Gucci whose speeches sound like a low-budget musical about the Weimar Republic.
Yeah.
That's almost offensive.
Yeah.
But what does the author want to achieve with that, other than to provoke?
Well, the provocation is definitely calculated, but it goes deeper. The Nazi in Gucci is a frightening image that contrasts apparent modernity with a dangerous ideology. It's a warning against the normalization of extremist views dressed up in a hip guise. And the low-budget musical about the Weimar Republic refers to the instability and failure of the first German democracy. A bleak parallel to the current political situation that the author is drawing here.
Moving on. The SPD, bigger than your pride, smaller than your gym motivation, with the vision to, let's try not to totally screw it up. That doesn't exactly sound like a spirit of optimism.
Absolutely. Here, a certain weariness and lack of ambitious goals are being satirized. The SPD is portrayed as a party that focuses more on damage control than on actually shaping the future. Perhaps this reflects the current debate in which the major parties often react rather than act.
The Greens, floating in the biodynamic space-time continuum with the belief that moral superiority is a substitute for actual politics. Sounds like someone has a problem with the eco-warriors.
The author satirically picks up on the often discussed discrepancy between idealistic claims and concrete political solutions. The moral superiority is presented as a possible stumbling block to pragmatic decisions, and the biodynamic space-time continuum suggests a certain, well, let's call it detachment from reality, as if to say, as long as our conscience is clear, it doesn't matter if it actually works.
Die Link, with Gysi, the senior president, who's probably the only one who doesn't think a typewriter is a TikTok filter. That's almost affectionate, isn't it?
Yeah.
For Die Link standards, at least.
Yes, there's a touch of nostalgia there, but also the question of whether traditional leftist politics are still relevant in today's digitalized world. It's a humorous jab at the generational conflict and the challenges this party is currently facing.
And the SSW with one seat, no comment, but maybe with a slam poem about Danish border policy in the drawer. Okay, that's really specific. What's the point? That even the smallest parties exist.
Exactly. The author uses this marginal phenomenon to illustrate the diversity and perhaps the absurdity of the political spectrum, and of course to subtly build a bridge to poetry slam, where niche topics are often dealt with in surprising ways.
Then this metaphor of the political slaughterhouse where values, credibility, and language are butchered, and that ironic cry for trust, trust, while allegedly everyone is stabbing everyone else in the back. Yeah. That's a pretty damning verdict on the state of democracy.
Absolutely. Here, the political arena is portrayed as a place of loss and deception. The cries for trust amidst betrayal underscore the deep divisions and the loss of faith in politics that the author perceives. It's like shouting peace in a room full of knives.
And the Bundestag as a shabby brothel. All glitz and glam on the outside, but decay and forgotten ideals stinking in the back rooms. These images are really something else. But they stick with you. What's the message?
The message is crystal clear. It's about the discrepancy between the public image of politics and the supposed reality behind the scenes. The shiny facade hides forgotten ideals that have been neglected and are now rotting away. It's a metaphor for the corruption of values and goals in the political business.
And then the author grabs us by the throat. And you, yes, you, sitting there, scrolling through this text, thinking this is exaggerated, and then the accusation that in the last election you voted for the party that disgusted you the least instead of the one that inspired you, because you've given up, because you've become silent, comfortable, cowardly. Ouch. What's the point of this direct attack? Does the author just want to scare us?
I think it's a deliberate attempt to shake the reader out of their comfort zone. It's a wake-up call that focuses on our own responsibility for the state of politics. The accusation aims to criticize the complacency and resignation that lead us to settle for the lesser evil instead of actively advocating for positive change. It's an uncomfortable truth that is being thrown at us here.
Okay, after this political dressing down comes the drastic shift to poetry slam with the poetic guillotine and the I Never Slam. First, the call to stop whining about love, depression, and world peace like it's a Pinterest board, and to say something that burns, someone's cleaning house in the ivory tower of poetry.
The author demands a radical reorientation of poetry slam, away from the pleasing, often hackneyed topics, towards a confrontation with the really burning questions of our time, and in a way that emotionally stirs and provokes reflection. It's about authenticity and using your own voice to make a difference.
And then the stylistic trick, I never. The deadliest lie on stage, and a tool for splitting truth. What the heck is that supposed to be? Sounds like instructions for self-destruction on stage.
The I never formula forces the speaker to confront their own inner contradictions and denials. By claiming something that contrasts with your own reality or social norms, you open a door to deeper truths. It's about letting the facade crumble and showing the discrepancy between what we say and what we really think or do. This honesty can be both liberating and painful for both the performer and the audience.
And then there are some examples that really pack a punch. I never fucked. Not myself. Not the system. Only occasionally my ideals pants down behind the supermarket of convenience.
Yeah.
That'll make you choke on your Nutella sandwich.
This example is deliberately provocative and uses drastic language to address the compromises and betrayals of our own convictions that we often encounter in everyday life. The supermarket of convenience stands here as a symbol for the temptations of the easy way, which, however, often comes at the cost of losing one's own ideals. It's a bitter pill we're being given here.
Or I never hated. Except the neighbor, the government, the mirror at 6:30 a.m. That's almost funny if it weren't so sad. Everyone knows that morning struggle with your reflection, right?
Exactly. It describes the everyday nature of frustration and dissatisfaction in a laconic yet apt way. The hatred of the neighbor or the government may seem superficial, but it points to deeper conflicts and a feeling of powerlessness. In the mirror at 6:30, it confronts us mercilessly with our own imperfections and the burdens of life.
I never lied until I said, I love you, to a country that has long forgotten me.
Yeah.
It gets under your skin. There's a deep sense of alienation there.
Absolutely. This example addresses the feeling of being uprooted and the connection to one's own homeland that may only be expressed out of habit or a sense of duty. It's about the inner distancing from a country to which you should actually feel you belong, but which may have turned its back on you.
And then, I never thought I could make a difference until I stood on stage and someone in the audience started to cry. There's still a glimmer of hope in all this misery.
Yes, it's precisely in this moment that the author sees the transformative potential of poetry slam. The immediate emotional impact of honest, unadulterated language becomes clear. The tears in the audience are proof that words can actually move something and create a deep connection between people. It's a glimmer of hope in an otherwise rather bleak analysis.
The author calls poetry slam a soul striptease, a literary Molotov cocktail hurled into the brothel of fake authenticity. Those comparisons are really something.
These drastic metaphors underscore the radical and revealing nature of poetry slam as the author understands it. It's about dropping the masks, showing your own vulnerability, and using the power of language to denounce hypocrisy and superficiality. It's a call for ruthless honesty towards yourself and the audience.
And then these opening and closing lines for a slam that he suggests. I never killed, but every day I suffocated a piece of truth inside myself. That's pretty heavy stuff. It takes a moment to digest that.
These lines summarize the author's central thesis in a very poignant way. The greatest violence is not always exercised through open aggression, but often through the daily suppression of one's own truth. Suffocating your inner voice leads to a form of self-loss and contributes to general apathy. It's a silent but all the more destructive process.
Then comes the transition from passive whining to active rebellion on stage. Poetry Master, available in German and English, is touted not as a book, but as a manual for emotional terrorism on stage, a manifesto, an act of revenge, and a liberation strike. Anyone expecting delicate poetry here is definitely in the wrong place.
Absolutely. It's about finding your own voice and using it as a weapon, not in the physical sense, but with the force of honest words. Emotional terrorism aims to shake up the audience, to provoke them, and to lure them out of their comfort zone. It's a call for literary rebellion.
And what exactly are you supposed to learn from this poetry master? How to build texts that feel like electric shocks to the brain, how to turn shame into dynamite and every I never into a rhetorical assassination. Sounds like an advanced self-defense course in verbal combat.
The author deliberately uses this martial language to emphasize the urgency and transformative power of poetry slam. It's about transforming your own inner anger and frustration into a creative and effective form of expression. It's a guide on how to turn your vulnerability into strength.
The ultimate impact should be to never write or feel the same again. And that final PS, I never knew words could kill. Now you know. And from now on, use them like weapons. That's a statement that makes an impact. It's almost scary.
Yes, it's a call for the conscious and responsible use of language. Words have the power to hurt, to manipulate, but also to inspire and to change. The author calls on us to recognize this power and to use it in a targeted way to defend our own truth and to denounce social injustices. It's both an empowerment and a warning.
Okay, let's sum it up. We had a pretty scathing analysis of German politics in 2025, which makes one thing clear. The author is extremely dissatisfied. And as a way out, or at least as an outlet, he presents poetry slam as kind of literary guerrilla tactic where personal truth becomes a weapon.
Exactly. Two sides of the same coin. The disillusioning analysis of the political state and the provocative call for radical self-empowerment through the power of language on stage. A kind of literary revolution in miniature.
What do you think will stay with you the most from this, let's say, unconventional analysis? The political cynicism, the radical idea of poetry slam, or this call to use your own truth like a sharp knife?
I'm particularly fascinated by the radical nature of the approach, the ruthless honesty that is demanded both in the political analysis and in the description of poetry slam. And of course, the idea that, especially in a time characterized by superficiality and fake news, the personal, uncomfortable truth can develop enormous, explosive power.
After this deep dive, what truth do you feel the urge to drag into the light no matter how? Is there something that's been simmering beneath the surface for a long time?
I think it's about questioning the small, everyday lies that we tell ourselves and others and finding the courage to speak the uncomfortable truth, even when it gets uncomfortable.
For those who want to delve deeper into this poetic underground struggle, I highly recommend the book Poetry Master, Poesycraft, and Seven Taken. But be careful. You could change your relationship with poetry forever.
Definitely. It's let's say, an inspiring work for all those who have had enough of quiet tones and want to find their voice.
Sehr kreativ, Stefan.